Welcome to the Value Creation Wheel. The Value Creation Wheel is a methodology for leadership, innovation, decision-making, and problem-solving. The Value Creation Wheel has 5 phases. The first phase is define. In this first phase, what we do is we define the challenge, we make a diagnostic of the organization, and we establish key performance indicators to decide what we want to achieve. Then we move to the second phase. On the second phase, the main goal is to generate ideas and to generate filters. This is one of the major differences between the Value Creation Wheel and other tools. That typically they generate a lot of ideas, but they don't generate the criteria to select the best ideas. This explains why very often when we are in the process of innovation and decision making, many key decision makers and many managers, they face the paradox of choice. In the particular case of the Value Creation Wheel, since we have the key decision makers selecting on phase 3 what are the best ideas and what are the best filters, then it will be much easier to deal with the paradox of choice. Also on phase 3, which is assess, what we do is the key decision makers, they basically establish a ranking from the most important filters to the less important filters. In other words, they start by saying which filters are must-have, the killers, and then which filters are the nice-to-have. Once these filters have been ranked, we move to phase 4. On phase 4, typically we go through the value creation funnel. We start with a lot of ideas, then we put filter number 1. Let's assume it's cost equal to 0, for example. Then let's assume we start with 200 ideas, cost 0, only 40 ideas go through. Then we put filter number 2. Let's say it needs to be done within 1 year, so speed to market, for example. Then only 5 ideas go through. Filter number 3, let's assume it's the amount of people that we want to allocate to the project, as well as the type of human resources that are more appropriate for this particular project. Let's assume the final outcome is 0 and we need to outsource. So basically what we have to do is we need to go back and generate more ideas because they did not pass the filters. Now let's assume many ideas went through all the filters. Then what we might have to do is we apply what we call the nice-to-have filters. These nice-to-have filters, they have different weights, and then by applying the different weights to the different filters, you can establish a ranking, you can sort the ideas from the most relevant to the least important. Once we arrive to the final ideas, then we move to phase number 5. Phase number 5 is act. What we do on phase 5 is typically we have to do, if we are speaking about an organization or a startup, we do a business model canvas. Of course, the 4 M's are critical. Why? Because if the key decision makers or key decision makers are not involved, typically what happen is the ideas will not be implemented. So the 4 M's, which stand for manpower, minute, money, and motivation, will establish if the idea is really realistic or not. Let's assume we have the 4 M's, then we can speak about aspects like shall we do a marketing plan? Shall we do a financial plan? Shall we do a business plan? And this is the way the value creation wheel ends. However, in order to ensure that the value creation wheel is properly implemented inside the organization, we need to make sure there is a team that will monitor the implementation of the value creation wheel. And if the ideas are really not implemented, that means that probably we need to go back on the wheel and try to understand which filters, what were the reasons, what were the problems that led to the not implementation of the value creation wheel. Once we identify those filters, we can put them again back into the funnel, phase 4, and then we do again the funnel, and we see which ideas go through. If we have no ideas again, we go back to generate more ideas. The value creation wheel has 5 phases: define, increase, assess, narrow, and act. Now I'm going to give you an example from our daily lives to explain how we should implement the value creation wheel to solve our personal challenges, professional challenges, and so on. Let's pick this example. On phase 1, you have to define a challenge. Let's assume the challenge is where to go on holidays. If you want to solve this challenge, typically you have to do a diagnostic of the current situation. Why do you go on holidays? Is because you are tired? Is because you want to relax? Is because you want to play sports? Is because you want to swim? Whatever, okay? This is the diagnostic. Then we have to establish the key performance indicators. What are the key performance indicators for our holidays? Is to spend more time with your family? Is to relax and simply read some books? What are your goals? So let's call these the key performance indicators. Once the challenge is clearly defined, let's assume again it's where shall we go on holidays, we move to phase 2 of the value creation wheel. On phase 2 of the value creation wheel, what we're gonna do is we're gonna increase the number of ideas that will be used to solve this challenge. If you ask a single person in a family what is the most appropriated place to go on holidays, an individual will tell you 4 or 5 places, typically the places where they were in the previous years. However, if you engage the whole family, let's say 4 people in the family, you're gonna have many more ideas, let's say 20 ideas. Now let's assume that I'm in a class with 60 students, where these 60 students, all of them have been in the past, for the past 5 years, in different holidays places. And I ask all of them, can you please tell me what are the best places where you have been in your holidays for the last 5 years? So if we have a class of 60, 70 students, if each one of them gives me 5 ideas, it's very likely I'm gonna have as a starting point to solve this challenge more than 300 ideas. So what we have after this is we have to move to filter generation of criteria to select the best ideas. This is one of the major differences between the value creation wheel and other frameworks. So in this particular case, if you speak with a single person, a single person will tell you probably the cost of the trip, the distance from his or her home, if there is a beach, if there is a cultural, if there is culture in that particular place, and so on. Now, let's imagine you want to engage your family. If one of your kids, for example, is allergic to mosquitoes, it's very likely that you're gonna add one more filter, right? Because you have to think about the interests of this particular stakeholder, which is your kid. Now, if you engage the 60 or 70 people of the audience, and some of your students, for example, have kids or babies, it's very likely they're gonna tell you as a filter, it should exist an hospital nearby. This explains why it is so important to generate a lot of ideas and to generate a lot of filters to come up with the best decision at the end of the process. Now, what happens with the typical traditional innovation and decision-making frameworks? It's leaders, they are faced with the paradox of choice. Why? Because they have so many ideas that they get lost. And at the same time, they get so many filters that they get lost. How do we solve this problem in the value creation wheel? Typically, we move to phase number 3. On phase number 3, we ask all the key decision makers, might be 1, 2, or a board of an organization, to select the ideas that they believe have the more potential, and also to select the filters that are more likely to be used to select the best ideas. Once they agree on the filters, we ask them to rank the filters from the most important to the least important. So if we are speaking about the case of the holiday destination, you start with a lot of ideas, let's say 50 holiday destinations. Then you put filter number 1, the cost of the trip. Now you only have 20 destinations. Filter number 2, distance from Lisbon. Now you have only 10 destinations. Filter number 3, if there is a beach. And now you have 0 destinations. If you have 0 destinations, what will happen? You need to go back and generate more ideas. Or alternatively, you need to go back and generate more filters. Or to make your filters more agile. Let's assume you have a filter that basically it's the cost of the trip should be 1,000 euros per person. It's obvious that if you say the cost of the trip should be 5,000 euros per person, many more ideas will go through, right? On the other hand, if you make the filter more restrictive and you say our budget is only 500 euros per person, much less ideas will go through. So this is why we say the VCW is a methodology that is simultaneously agile and stage gate. So we can go back at any time. It is a wheel, right? So once we arrive to the final ideas, we move to phase number 5, which is you decide your holiday destination. Let's assume it's Côte d'Azur. What you're going to do is you're going to take your flight from Lisbon to Côte d'Azur. Then you drive a car from Côte d'Azur, from Marseille to Côte d'Azur, and then you rent a hotel there, right? So all of this needs to be planned. So that is precisely phase number 5, where typically the 4 M's are established: manpower, minute, money, and motivation, in order to ensure that the key decision makers are really motivated to go on holidays. To summarize, the value creation wheel is a methodology that is simultaneously stage gate and agile. It has been used by companies across the globe, companies that range from Fortune 500 until non-governmental organizations, startups, and governmental organizations. Thank you very much for your attention.